Good evening, everybody. I'm so delighted to welcome you here, both in the room and on Zoom, to the Historical Society of Pennsylvania for our two-day workshop, Using, Doing, Teaching Black History. My name is Justina Barrett, and I serve in the Learning and Engagement Department here at the Historical Society with my colleagues Selena Austin and Brianna Quaid and Katie Clark. We strive to bring the stories of our archives out to the public. We have over 22 million books, graphic items, and manuscripts, and they tell the stories of all Americans. These archives are open for you to come to 13th and Locust and do your own research. So before we get started tonight, a little bit of housekeeping because we are on Zoom as well as in the room. If you're at Zoom, we have closed captioning. You can hit the CC button. We will be recording today's program and sending it out to everybody who registered in the next few days. So you don't need to take notes. You can continue and look forward to seeing it again. We will have time at the end for Q&A. If you're at home on Zoom, you can go ahead and put those questions in the Q&A box as you think of them throughout the program. And we are in webinar mode, which means we cannot see you and you cannot see each other. But you can see us gathered on site, friends. So there is a camera in the back of the room, just so you know we're zooming out. I would also like to acknowledge the generous donors who made this weekend possible. We thank the Haverford Trust Company and the Pennsylvania Abolition Society Endowment Fund at the Philadelphia Foundation. HSP is currently hosting an exhibit called Free as One, Black World Making in the Pennsylvania Abolition Society Papers, which we curated with the 1838 Black Metropolis, our co-hosts for this weekend's programs. We are commemorating the moment that is exactly 250 years ago in April of 1775, when a group of Philadelphians gathered in a tavern to discuss the plight of an enslaved Afro-Indigenous woman named Dinah Neville, who sought their assistance. This meeting occurred on April 14th, just 5 days before the shots were fired at Lexington and Concord, beginning what we know as the American Revolution. And so from the very moment of birth, both the struggle for American independence and the struggle for freedom from enslavement have been intertwined. The founding of that organized effort to end slavery in that moment demands that we consider how the experience of liberty must be a shared one, and how throughout our shared American history, it has not been. HSP has stewarded the collections of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society since the 1930s, and many, many researchers have used them to explore the abolition movement. What our current exhibit, Free as One, sets out to do with these documents is to detail the agency, the strategies, the communication networks utilized by enslaved and free people of African descent to achieve this liberty for themselves and for their loved ones. The work that they did with the assistance of their white allies led to the development of an active, robust, strategic, and innovative free Black community here in Philadelphia that led the struggle for emancipation in the years before the Civil War, and demonstrated how the tools of democracy can be deployed to ensure a more perfect union. It has been an honor and a true privilege to work with and learn from Michiko Quinones and Morgan Lloyd of the 1838 Black Metropolis. Your assignment as we move into the commemoration of America 250, the semi-quincentennial, is to dive into their digital project, 1838 Black Metropolis. And so to move on forward with tonight, I invite Morgan Lloyd up to introduce our esteemed keynote address.
Bring it down just a tad as I'm a bit height deficient. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Also forgive me as I'm operating with my speech on my phone. So good evening, everyone. My name is Morgan Lloyd. I am one of the co-founders, in addition to Miss Michiko Quinones over there, of 1838 Black Metropolis. I also operate as the president. First and foremost, We want to thank you all so much for being here. Whether you're here just for the night or if you're going to be joining us for the next 2 days, it is deeply exciting and it comes from a deep, heartfelt place to have you all join us on our mission just to uplift the ancestors. To our dear friend, Justina Barrett, and her incredible staff members, Brianna Quaid, Selena Austin, Katie Clark, and for their we want to thank you all for your commitment to Black history in Philadelphia. And now, above all things, trying not to geek out and be too nervous here, it is my phenomenal honor to introduce today's keynote speaker, a woman whose work doesn't just challenge how we study history, but how we see it and how we see ourselves inside of it. Professor Nell Irvin Painter. She is the Edwards Professor of American History, Emerita at Princeton University. She is a Mary Ellen von der Hayden Fellow at the American Academy in Berlin, a celebrated historian, an acclaimed artist, and a fierce advocate for truth in all of its forms. Many of you know her book, The History of White People. That's right, we can clap for it if you've read it, and if not, please read it, it's phenomenal. A book that flips the script on race, identity, and power. My co-founder, Michiko Quinones, shared with me the moment when she first read it. And she said she wasn't even questioning the word Caucasian. It was just something that she grew up hearing, thinking it was scientific, factual, neutral. But after reading Dr. Painter's work, it made her realize that the word came not from biology, but from 18th century race science. A mythology rooted not in truth, but in oppression. She said it blew her mind wide open. That's what Dr. Painter does. She helps us ask questions we didn't even know were at the table. Her biography of Sojourner Truth is iconic. Her memoir, Old in Art School, is called To Reinvent Ourselves No Matter Our Age. And her latest book, I Just Keep Talking, A Life in Essays, was named a New York Times notable book of 2024. Her voice still leads us in both organizations of American histories and Southern Historical Association. She's received honorary degrees from Yale, UNC, Wesleyan, and Dartmouth. And after earning her PhD in history from Harvard, she went on to pursue degrees in painting from Mason Gross School of Arts at Rutgers and Rhode Island School of Design. Because, for Dr. Painter, history is not just a story we tell. It is a world we shape. Please join me in welcoming the brilliant, the fearless, the ever-curious Dr. Nell Irvin Painter.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Morgan. And thank you all. I prepared for you and I put it in a folder and I printed it out, my comments, but being here, I realized that I wanted to say two things that are not in the paper. One of them is well, here you're seeing my art. This is just going to keep going, and I'm not going to talk around it right now because I'm going to tell you things that I didn't prepare for. But the phrase reclaim, rewrite, restore that you saw earlier really spoke to me in terms of what we are doing. I'm not just saying what we need to do because you are doing the work. You're doing the work. This is not anything that we have to invent. You're doing the work. And I want all of you to do the work. And what I really like about being here and about reclaim, rewrite, restore is reclaiming, rewriting, and restoring the presence of Black Americans in the North, in Philadelphia, in my New Jersey, in Sojourner Truth's New York State, Hudson Valley, in W.E.B. Du Bois's Massachusetts. And the reason I think it's really doubly important, I mean, it's important because we need to know that the people were there and what they were doing. They were doing things. We need to know that. But for me, concentrating for a moment on Black history in the North wrenches Black history out of the grasp of the South. Now, I wasn't going to talk to you very much about my new book on Sojourner Truth, which I am writing as we speak. The title is Sojourner Truth Was a New Yorker, and She Didn't Say That. So you already know she didn't say that, so I don't have to explain that to you. But if there's somebody here who doesn't know, I'll explain that later. But so Sojourner Truth was a New Yorker. So as I go into Sojourner Truth, concentrating on Sojourner Truth as a New Yorker, and as you would do in your work of your Sojourner Truth in Philadelphia and in Pennsylvania, you would discover a past that is invisible if your idea of Black history is only the South. As you know, the people who ran Southern society, I won't speak of any of them today, but the people who ran Southern society in the past made it virtually impossible. They couldn't stamp out reading and writing completely, but they tried. And they were successful enough so that at least so far, we don't have a reading history of Black Southerners in the 19th century. Maybe somebody here will be doing research and discover that. If we look, we will find, but we haven't looked yet. And our general idea about 19th, 18th century Black Americans in the South is that they were prevented from reading and writing. And so they don't have a history. They don't have a print history. They don't have a history of the Southern book. What my work on Sojourner Truth showed me was I could focus now on Sojourner Truth as a self-published author. You know that Sojourner Truth dictated her narrative in the late 1840s in Northampton, Massachusetts. And if you don't know about the narrative of Sojourner Truth, you can go get my version, my edition, Penguin Classic edition, which has a long introduction and a lot of footnotes. I didn't focus on that when I did my first book on Sojourner Truth in the 90s, which is called Sojourner Truth, A Life, a Symbol. And that came out in its second edition last year. But now, well, one of the things that's happened since the 90s, so much has happened since the 90s, thank heaven, is that in the 90s, the history of the book and Black history were very far apart. The history of the book tended to talk about European writers, before the 18th century, rare books and so forth. The history of the book was very much an upper class. Well, the objects were upper class objects. And so the history of the book was focused in specialized collections. And it didn't do Black writing. So Black history, again, because of this overbearing Southernness, didn't do a whole lot with reading and writing. There were some things, but they didn't do a whole lot. But what's happened in the meanwhile, is that the two fields have been coming together, so that those of us who do Black history are more attentive to the history of the book, and the people who do the history of the book are more attentive to Black history. So I was able to now see Sojourner Truth's narrative of Sojourner Truth in light of the history of the book, which concentrates on material objects. And if I concentrate on the narrative of Sojourner Truth as a material object, I want to know who printed it, how much did it cost, how did it get distributed? And now I can give you those answers. No, I can't now, but I will soon. I can give you those answers. And so now I'm talking about Sojourner Truth, self-published author of an as told to autobiography. And so when I think about Sojourner Truth as an author, and remember, I just published a new book last year. And came off a book tour, that Sojourner Truth made her own book tour. She carried around a carpet bag with her book, and she went to likely meetings of abolitionists and women's rights people. So she was on her book tour when she went to Akron, Ohio. Oh, Sojourner Truth's book tour. So she went around, and I can follow her around the North, largely between New England, New York, over to Ohio, not so much Pennsylvania, but there she was tapping into a market that already existed. There was a market for Black writing. I mean, there was a market for abolitionist writing and you know, that sort of thing. But, so that the market was there together. So when she was on her book tour in the 1850s, that market existed. The people who the former enslaved people who published their narratives in the 20s or the 30s couldn't tap into that because the market wasn't there yet. But by the 50s, the market was there. And so where I want to end with this little detour is encouraging you, as you probably are already doing, to think about the market, the culture of reading and writing in the North for Black people before the Civil War. Okay. Now, so let's get it back from the South. Here are my prepared remarks. The first thing I wanted to do was tell you how I came to make the triptych that you are seeing here, and that is in that beautiful coffee table book, 200 Years, the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, 1824, 2024. So a few years ago, David Brigham invited me, Nell Painter historian, to comment on one of the featured items that was going to be in the coffee table book. So I said, if I can make art with it. And he said, sure. So on pages 172 to 175, you will find William Still's Journal C. You'll see the 2 pages. You'll see a photograph of William Still, and you will see my historical essay, which is called Arrived New Names, which is the same name of the triptych. William Still's Journal C was my inspiration. And it is such a moving document. How was it that I decided that I wanted to do art in this wonderful book? Morgan has already told you that after I left Princeton, I earned 2 degrees in painting, a Bachelor of Fine Art from the Mason Grove School of Art in Rutgers, and a master's in painting from the Rhode Island School of Design. And I wrote about that experience in my memoir of being old in art school, that is to say, older than 32. And I also wrote about that experience in I Just Keep Talking, which I just showed you. Both those books include my own art. And I just wanted to show you one page, which is from an artist's book. You can't really see this, but I'm going to pretend you can. That is a page from a book I made actually in Italy, just as COVID was closing everything down in 2020. And the book is called American Whiteness Since Trump, because the book that Morgan mentioned came out in 2010. And a lot has happened with white people since then. So I wanted to bring it up to date. And that's what it became, an artist's book. That's one page of my drawing of from 2020. But there's a lot of art in this book, as there's a lot of art in Olden Art School. In Olden Art School, it's kind of work in progress. So you can see what I'm doing as I go along. One of the things that art school didn't want me to do was use my history background and to use text. So it took me about 10 years to get over that. And now I write a lot in my art. These 2 books and my entry in the coffee table book from the Historical Society of Pennsylvania do both things at once. They're visual and they're text. So the triptych here, Arrived New Names. Let me tell you a little bit about that. The underlying pattern comes from a Portuguese melon. Before my husband and I moved to East Orange, we lived for many years in Newark, and we lived in the neighborhood by the train station, which calls itself Portuguese. Actually, it's Brazilian and every other immigrant in the world. But the supermarket there, and I was there just the other day to get some olive oil. It's a great supermarket. The supermarket has a melon they call Portuguese melon or Christmas melon, and it's green, and it has this pattern on the skin. And I thought, that's a great pattern because it's obviously organic, but it also has that sense of going somewhere. And I thought that went very well with Journal C, of people who were coming from and going to. So you can go through some of those other drawings to show how the image kind of came together, because I had to make a lot of different drawings before we got to the 3 that got used. And then you also will see me working on the print. So by 2022, when I made these, I was comfortable doing the image and the text together, but it was not easy to do. Now, so I come at things from two sides, from history and from art. Now, I've heard some people say now that history has nothing for Black people. Have any of you heard that? Oh, thank God. I save you from that. It comes from uppity young people who stand up and say, history has nothing for Black people. Because, as they say, the archive is made by them and it lies. And so we, Black people, since we can't go to history, we have to make up what we want to hear. And needless to say, I don't like this because, well, for many ways. One reason is that I got my PhD in 1974. And I've been writing history since then. And I'm not the only one. I'm not the only Black woman writing history. I'm not the only Black woman who's been writing history for 30, 40 years. And before my time, there were other Black people and allies writing Black history. Before the 21st century, a lot of that history couldn't get out. It couldn't get circulated easily because American society was tamping down intellectual production from Black people. But journals like the Journal of Negro History, which goes back to the 19 teens. And then we were talking earlier about Black people. Where were they in the 1840s? In Massachusetts, writing histories. So the Black history goes back multiple generations. Printed, published Black history goes back multiple generations. We don't have to make it up. And finally, no, not finally, I just keep talking. This idea of the archive. There isn't, I mean, who better to know that there isn't the archive? And the archive keeps getting bigger and broader and deeper. The more questions we ask of the archive, the more the archive, the bigger the archive is. So last year, or was it the year before, I went to Rutgers for a conference honoring my esteemed colleague, Deborah Gray White, who wrote the first easily obtainable, circulated book on enslaved Black women. She had a hell of a time getting it published in the 1980s, but she has continued, it did finally get published, and it's sold millions of copies now. And so she is kind of one of the godmothers of Black women's history. And there were so many other historians there, people I may have met along the way decades ago, people whom I had never met because they were very young. And they were writing work that we could not have imagined in the 20th century. We couldn't have imagined that the source material would be there. For instance, using Civil War pension records. And then all the documents that have been digitized, so you don't have, if you are not fortunate enough to be in Philadelphia with this wonderful collection, you can sit at home at exit 148 by the Garden State Parkway and have access to so many kinds of documents. In closing, I want to say something that makes me sad. And it's how the way our present time rounds up people and ships them away reminds me of William Still's journals from the 1850s. 125 years ago, Black people were subject to kidnapping without recourse to law. Today, it's immigrants, xenophobia as kindred to racism. We still haven't defeated racism, but we have blunted it through 2 long campaigns for justice, first against slavery, then against Jim Crow. We still have the tools for defending human rights, so let's use them again. Thank you. Do you want to recognize people?
So I think we have some time for questions. And I'm going to head over to my colleague Selena Austin to see if we have anything in the chat. I welcome anybody to put those questions in the chat right now. And if we have any in the room, I have one to get us started, Dr. Painter, and
I
that,
have one right there.
and then, okay. Okay, let's jump over here.
Hi, again, it's Carolyn Williams. Before I went to get my earn a graduate degree in history, I took undergraduate courses. I did take the course History of the Book, and I actually used the collection here to.
Yeah, when was that you were studying?
That was in like 2018 or whatever. It's like another life. I actually came from the STEM world. I do history too. But the thing is that I had to do a paper, so I chose the History of Gouldtown book by Theophilus Gould Stewart and William Stewart. And I used the Lippincott papers here because that's who published it. So you're now inspiring me to maybe turn that into a journal article. And if you had recommendations for which journals are interested in that kind of work. It was fascinating because they ended up funding it themselves.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
I, a couple of years ago, asked the people who do the history of the book to help me understand how Sojourner Truth distributed her book. And they have a chat called Sharp. And it comes out, I think it comes out of the University of Indiana, but it's international. And maybe if you look up history of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is
And every day I get, 3 postings from them, sometimes in French because the Canadians are doing it and people in Edinburgh and, it's all around, it's international.
Yeah, and at that time, most Black authors were published by religious organizations. So it was very rare for a mainstream publisher to publish. It was in 1913, when that book was published. So it was more rare for a mainstream publisher to take a Black author's work.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi. You talked a bit about the melon, the organic pattern. I just wanted you to talk a little bit about color and I don't know, is that something that comes to you during, before, vision, normative, that kind of thing? Because I can't wait to see them after the talk.
They're right behind you, yeah. With this, you see part of my studio wall in Newark, and this is only, I made probably 20 drawings before. My process is back and forth between the hand and the computer. So I also use digital tools to play with that. You don't see it that much in this piece. And I think I may have done that while I was working on this, but I didn't like the results because I think for me, part of the beauty of these is that very organic sort of growing, handmade, yeah. But I think a lot about that. I think a lot about color. And using Photoshop, I can play with color very easily.
Thank you so much for your presentation and opening remarks. I was just sort of reflecting about and wanted to hear from you what you think about like corporate media and how it portrays Black history and like how that might kind of intersect with, you know, knowledge about Black history in general.
Yeah, that's a really big question because corporate media is. So let me just turn to Instagram. How's that?
What did you say?
Instagram,
Oh, gotcha.
where you can follow me. I post regularly. In fact, I posted as I was leaving the train station because there's some new buildings I had not seen. So if you want to see how I see the world, it's on Instagram. But I also see a lot of hits on Black history. And I'm glad they're there because they let you know that all these things happened and all these people were there. But it's just, it's just a teeny little hit. And that's better than nothing, but it's not enough. So corporate media, in our country, it is corporate media. So it's profit making. And profit making goes for popularity, and popularity goes for ease. What we're doing is work. And sometimes what we publish is not ease. So remember when I talked about the people who stand up and say, it's all, we have to do wake work because there's nothing there for us. Those people have not done the work.
We have a question from somebody on the Zoom. Do the ancestors communicate with you?
Do the ancestors communicate with me? Well, like corporate media, ancestors and communicate are very big terms. But I do think that toward the end of the 20th century, Sojourner Truth was going around to historians and saying, write my life. Because three historians published books, all good books, kind of at the same time. The first one was from Carlton Mabie, who was then a professor at SUNY New Paltz, and that was the neighborhood that Sojourner, as Isabella, lived in. And then I published mine, and then Margaret Washington published a really big, thick book that I highly recommend to you. It's called Sojourner Truth's America. So for me, I focus more on the biography of Sojourner Truth as a truly unique individual. For me, Sojourner Truth is not every Black woman. Sojourner Truth is an absolutely extraordinary American. Margaret Washington's book is very well researched and does the social history. So these three books came out around the same time. And I think it's because Sojourner Truth was going around telling people to talk to her. Now, rather than the ancestors, I have a source that I call my brain in my gut, my reptilian brain that works when I am asleep, when I am knitting, when I'm paying attention to something else. and it talks to me. It does not have the name of any of my ancestors.
So I have a question for you. So I've been surprised myself at the number of books written by Black people in the 19th century, and I keep finding more of them. Some were for personal use and weren't published. Many were published. And I'm curious as to, with this wide range of, Delaney wrote a book and a lot of other people. Were they able to make enough money to sustain themselves or to even make a fairly decent living?
By and large, no. But that's not just Black writers. That's artist writers in the United States. Now, Sojourner Truth, you probably have seen her photographs, and she has a legend underneath that says, "I sell the shadow to support the substance." And she didn't sell them for very much. I think they were like a quarter each, but she didn't need a whole lot of money. And so I think she was able to support herself with her books and her carte de visite. She also received, you know, sort of goodwill gestures of people just giving her money. But during the time that she was distributing her book and her photographs, she was in her 50s and 60s. So she had been a hardworking woman, and she was very proud of being a very good worker. She was an excellent cook, a really good dancer, and a really good singer. But by the time she was distributing her book, I'm not sure that she was still working in people's houses. So it was very unusual in the United States for a writer to support himself through writing. Very unusual. And probably, I don't think even Frederick Douglass managed that. But if anybody did, it would be him.
Hi. Could you say a little more about the inscriptions that you wrote in the main?
Sure.
Could you?
Yeah.
tell us?
Thank you. I'm glad you asked that. That is what William Still wrote down in Journal C. So when the question was, would I say something about what's in the writing? And it's what people told William Still, and he wrote in Journal C, as he would say, what's your name? Where do you come from? How old are you? Do you have your family with you? Who owned you? What was your situation? It's a fantastic source. I mean, if anybody here is an artist, a novelist, you know, this is a great source. But for me, what struck me, and I wasn't looking for this, was that over and over again, people would say, my name was Nell Irvin in Maryland. Now I am Nell Irvin Painter.
Yeah.
And so when they arrived, they took new names. And so that's how we got the name of the piece.
We have some more questions from the Zoom. Could you speak to the challenges in trying to incorporate the visual culture of an era with text on the same topic? For example, images confined to 10 pages or so at the center of a book.
I'm going to answer that obliquely, because this book, which is very heavy because it has really good paper, because it has well, I'm not going to be able to take my word for it. It has images throughout. And I said to my editor when we were going through the process of signing a contract, I said, I want images throughout. I don't want just an insert. I don't want just a black and white insert on flimsy paper. I want the colored images to go throughout. And they said, oh, no, we can't do that. The book it's too expensive. The book will cost $40. Nobody will buy it. No, we can't do that. But my little publisher, my little independent publisher in Berkeley, Counterpoint, who published Olden Art School, they put the images throughout. And the book didn't cost $40. You can do it. So I said, go talk to your graphics people. And so the Doubleday people who published I Just Keep Talking went to their graphics people. They said, can you do this? And the graphics people said, yeah, you can do it. So the book that I am working on as we speak, Sojourner Truth was a New Yorker, and she didn't say that. Penguin is publishing that. It's part of a series that Henry Louis Gates has, as they say, curated. So Penguin is going to do that. So when we were talking about contracting the book, I said, I want to be able to put color art throughout the book. And they said, oh, no, we can't do that. The book will cost $40. Nobody will buy it. And I said, go talk to your graphics people. And they said, yeah, we can do it. So you have to stand up for yourself and tell them to go talk to their graphics people because the technology has changed.
Oh, can you hear me? I have one more for the Zoom, and it's a little bit of a long one, so just bear with me for a second. This is from a history PhD student at Temple University. Despite the shift toward a more inclusive archive that is rich in the Black experience, it is not always easy to navigate their underrepresented voices. Do you have any methodological advice on what kinds of sources, especially related to material culture, help you to locate the Black experience in such instances?
First of all, there is no such thing as the Black experience. There are millions of Black people who have lived all over, I was going to say the Western Hemisphere, but all over the world, over many, many generations. So if the student is looking for something to tell him or her about the Black experience, they've asked the wrong person. If they are interested in, say, Black business, 19th century Black business in Philadelphia, they come here. If they are interested in Black whalers before the Civil War, they go to Rhode Island. If they are interested in Black printers, they go to Rochester, New York. So it depends on what the person is interested in. There is no the Black experience. There are millions of Black experiences, and we need to pay attention to them for themselves. Put it in your mouth.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, okay. No, while I'm sitting here, I'm focused on the picture that's on the wall, on the screen. And I keep, in my spirit, I'm seeing roots, I'm seeing seeds, the dirt, legacy, history, the coming and the going. I think it was beautifully laid out. It's just magical.
You made my day.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Keep someone, yeah. I'm going to travel over there. I know we have someone who's been waiting. Oh, sure. All right.
I do this all the time. I don't know how I do it. I don't know what happens. But thank you for the ending about human rights. I think that that's important for us. I think that's important for us to recognize that we're in that moment, reparations and human rights. I think that's important to bring together now. I thought biology. You said art, history. And I said, well, you know, these streams is like, I've seen cells that, you know, when they're at that micro level, that's what they look like. And so biology, so science is
Yeah.
a part of that.
Yeah.
And I think it dovetails to that. But I was thinking about Sojourner Truth and archives and what you said about her not necessarily writing her work,
She didn't read or write.
but she produced things that would be part of the archive. And I'm thinking of the present things that are going to be archival by people like Sojourner Truth who don't read or write. How do that get collected? How do historians understand in the now about that future? And how does institutions like this need to understand about that now when we're talking about collection in the future?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. And that was something that I had in my notes to say that everybody here needs to save everything. Now, the question about how do historians get to it, that's a step between your storage locker and an archive, which would be a museum or a historical society. Now, there are lots and lots of different museums and historical societies. So for instance, if in your storage locker, you have a sweater that you knitted. And I don't know if this would be the right place. No, you would have to go to a place that collects objects. You would have to find the right archive. So, but there are a lot of them, and they're much more open in two ways that I want to mention. One, to Black stuff, and two, to material objects than they were in the 20th century. But everybody can write a journal, you know, a little piece of paper or a little book and save that. And probably everybody would collect that. And even, so for instance, if you kept a journal or you keep a journal and you're talking about your journal and you say that you came here today and we talked about the history of the book. And then that young person who's a graduate student could come find your journal here and discover that the question of the history of the Black book was circulating this year. That would be a historical document.
I've only seen you on C-SPAN, so I'm so privileged to see you today. But I wanted you to talk about the importance of encouraging our era to write about our stories. I just found out how much I don't know about my grandmother's life. And we've been discouraged from telling our stories because often the society tells us that our stories aren't important. So we have to figure out.
No. Stop. Everybody can say they haven't been encouraged. It's not about the society. It's about us.
Yes.
It's up to us. Because everybody's history is nothing unless those people preserve it. It's not about the society. So yes, everybody in our generation, you're probably younger than me, but everybody in an older generation of any American background could say what you have said, because most Americans don't know anything about their grandparents, not to mention the people who are older. It's not just Black people. It's not just Black people. But if you want to change it, you've got to do it.
I just want to say this. I just discovered that the school named after Paul Laurence Dunbar in Philadelphia does not have a library. And the children in that school don't even know about Paul Laurence Dunbar.
Yeah.
And so I'm starting to understand that even though we wait for systems to educate us, we have to take some of that responsibility as families and communities to right what is wrong or what is overlooked. So I appreciate everything you've done and continue to do.
Good. Thank you.
I think we have time for two more.
Yes, my name is Stephen Jones. 30 years ago, I published an article on African-American material culture in 19th century Philadelphia.
Terrific.
Looking at documents rather than just objects, I came across over 750 names of Black people professionally involved in the visual arts then, more than 500 of whom were women.
Wow.
And subsequently, I have looked at not only the artists, but the patrons of the artists.
Terrific.
And it turns out that many, many more of them are Black women who are patronizing, whether it be through the Philadelphia Female Anti-Slavery Society,
Wow.
whether it be all the Black women's groups who supported David Bustill Bowser's flags he painted for the United States Colored Troops. Into the 20th century, Sadie T.M. Alexander was the most prominent patron of African-American artists in the second quarter of this century.
Yes.
And the Smithsonian American Art Museum recently got an Aaron Douglas painting. They considered it their most important acquisition of the last year.
Wow.
And it was commissioned by an African-American woman. How do we increase the understanding and appreciation for what Black women have done, both as artists and as patrons of the arts, supporting both Black men and Black women artists?
Well, I think you're your own best advertisement for that, because what you have done is the answer. And probably you would find, I hope you're continuing to do this work, you would find it much less difficult to get a hearing now than you would have in the 20th century, when people would say, oh, that's not important, or, the usual stupid things that people said in the 20th century. But you have done that. I don't know if the Philadelphia Art Museum is the place. There is an African-American museum here, isn't there? Do they have a journal? That's what I'd want to know. For many, many years, I subscribed to the International Journal of First Black and then African-American Art, coming out of Morgan State University. And I don't know if that still is going, but if it is, that would be a place. But are you connected to an art school now? But you have, I know Penn has a master's program, because I came and looked at it and I didn't like it, so I never applied. In those days, it was too stuffy, and I'm sure it's much better now. But you could just go to them and say, look, I've got this information that I want to publish. Help me find a place to publish it. Yeah. And maybe republish what you already published many years ago.
Yeah. We'll do Pam and then we'll do Dr.
I just wanted to suggest Asala.
Yeah.
Which has Carter G. Woodson's original Journal of Negro History but that's still being published. And
Yes, indeed.
that's a place to submit the kind of work you've done, and especially teasing out the women.
Yeah.
I think that would be popular.
I think that's a really good idea, but in addition to pursuing art historical publications. Okay, yeah, so, yeah, talk to each other.
Yeah, Dr. Coleman.
Thank you very much, Professor Painter, for this wonderful talk and introducing us to your new books. I have a question about a book whose materiality in the, I guess, the early part of the 19th century was so fundamental. We're approaching the bicentenary, 200 years since the publication in 1829 of David Walker's Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World.
Yes.
We only have between now and 2029 a few years to prepare for that bicentenary. To what should we turn our minds, and how should we be preparing to commemorate and remember this monumental book?
That's a great idea. And are you thinking of doing this yourself? Well, let's pretend that you were thinking of doing this yourself. Okay, so I would ask you, who is your community? And start there. So if your community is art historians, if your community is people who are publishing history, if your community is current poets, start close to you and then work out. One way to start is to raise a little money. And you should have everybody in this room giving you $100. So there's no one way to start.
I think we're going to wrap up for time right now. So let's all give one final round of applause. Wow. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being here. Thank you on Zoom. We hope to see you at HSP. hsp.org/enews is how you stay in touch with us. We're going to keep this work going specifically tomorrow morning and all throughout the remainder of the year. Free as one, Black World Making in the Pennsylvania Abolition Society Papers is open until Memorial Day. So if you're at home, please come down Tuesday through Fridays to see that. Thank you so much.